Hey guys, Will here. So Fanatec have just announced their brand new Gran Turismo DD Extreme package, which includes the new DD Plus wheelbase that we took a look at just a couple of weeks ago here at Boosted Media, as well as a brand new Gran Turismo wheel, which has been designed in collaboration with Polyphony Digital, who are of course the makers of Gran Turismo 7. So what we're going to be doing in today's video is a bit of a deep dive into the wheel specifically. The video I just referenced has pretty much all the information you need with regards to the wheelbase. We still don't have full force integration in any games, and we are still on early release drivers at this point in time. So we'll be doubling back and revisiting the base in more detail a little bit later on. But the question we're going to be answering today, is it worth your money to purchase this as a bundle with the wheel and the wheelbase, or are you better off just buying the base on its own and buying a different wheel? Let's dive in and find out. So before we get started today, firstly, there's a couple of important things that we need to discuss with regards to Fanatec. Now, you guys are probably aware by now the delays that they've had with the DD Plus and shipping. The Extreme, which although nobody was aware of at the time, was also caught up in this as well. So we actually shot the majority of this review over 3 months ago now. It was originally meant to go live back in late December when the DD Plus was originally meant to ship. So the good news is that just in the last 24 hours at the time that we're recording this, they have started shipping the DD Pluses out to customers. So that's definitely a relief to those who ordered these and had to wait a very long time. Now, from what I understand, the delays in the licensing for the DD Plus and DD Extreme have meant that they've had time to catch up on their inventory for both of these products. So that means that there shouldn't be any delays with shipping these out to customers if you were to order one now. So the delivery date that you see, or the shipping date that you see on their website, should theoretically be accurate. Now, that said, there have been a lot of issues over the last few months with those timelines blowing out for people. It seems to be a little bit hit and miss. The best advice I can give you with regards to that is to check out the thread on Reddit. There's actually a whole subreddit dedicated to shipping delays and things like that. So check that out. That'll give you a good understanding what people's experiences are like at the time that you're watching this video. I can tell you over the last couple of weeks, it does seem like people are starting to receive their orders a lot more quickly, and things do seem to be getting back on track, at least with regards to logistics. Now, customer support is a separate issue as well, and I do think it's important to touch on this simply because this is something that may have an impact on your overall experience. So I won't go into all the reasons why now. As you guys might have seen across our social media channels, I am planning a meeting with Fanatec, and I was actually hoping that I would have some, I would have had that meeting and have some answers for you guys before this video went live, but unfortunately we are still waiting for them to get in touch with us with an appropriate time for us to sit down with them and chat about all this stuff. But there are still some major delays with regards to customer service response times. So normally they aim to respond to service inquiries within sort of 2 to 3 business days. At the moment, that has blown out to numbers of weeks. So they do still seem to be struggling to get on top of the customer support side of things. In a practical sense, what that means for you guys is if you are buying one of these things and you have a problem with it, maybe it arrives DOA or something like that, there may be a significant delay there in terms of getting that resolved, and that'll relate to just general technical inquiries as well. So rather than speculating, I'll continue to put pressure on them to have that meeting with them and get some clear answers for you guys as to exactly what's going on and what you can expect moving forward as quickly as I possibly can. But just so you're aware, again, hopefully, and again, don't quote me on this, but from what I can tell at least, you shouldn't have any significant delays in receiving one of these if you do order one at the time that I'm recording this video at least, but there are still some significant delays with regards to customer service response time, so just be aware of that. So moving on from all that now, you do need to be aware that Fanatec did send us across these products for us to check out for making this review video. As is always the case here at Boosted Media, no third party has any sort of input into what we're saying. So what we're going to be sharing today is purely just my own observations and my own opinions about these products. And if you do decide you want to pick up any of the products that we talk about in today's video, whether it's Fanatec or any other brand, we do have some affiliate links down in the description box below. That is an awesome way of helping support our work here at Boosted Media without it costing you an extra cent. And it's just something that's available to you guys if you find what we do here of value and you want to help support us. So we do really appreciate your support there. But let's move on now and talk about pricing. So I'll flash up on the screen for you guys now the pricing of both this bundle and the DD Plus on its own, so you guys can see the comparison between the two. So whether or not that's value for money for you guys is going to be quite subjective. It's going to depend on whether you already have a large selection of wheels within your possession or whether you're buying into the ecosystem for the very first time. But the design that you'll find with this wheel, the feature set, are all kind of leaning towards a first steering wheel, a wheel that's going to be versatile enough that you can use it with pretty much anything and have a good experience. Before you go deeper into the rabbit hole, whole and get some more specialized wheels that are going to suit specific types of cars more, I guess, more closely. So let's unpack this now and have a look at exactly what features we have on the wheel. So straight from the outset, there's a couple of things that I'm really happy about with this wheel. 300mm diameter for starters, which you guys have heard me harp on about for ages now. 300mm for me at least is a really great sort of middle ground. Gives you enough versatility, as I said before, to drive pretty much anything that you're likely to find within sim racing. Also really happy, I can't emphasize this enough, that it is a completely round wheel as opposed to the D-shaped wheel that came bundled with the GT DD Pro previously. The reason for that being, of course, that if you're doing rally style driving or drifting or anything where you need to be able to slip the wheel through your hands smoothly, without a round wheel, that becomes quite difficult, in varying degrees, of course. But if you were to use a wheel like this and imagine trying drifting with something like that, it's not going to end well. And you can see plenty of videos where I tried that right here on the channel to see just how quickly that can get out of hand. So being able to slip the wheel through your hands, 300mm round wheel, straight away, those are two massive ticks for versatility, at least in my mind. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think. But beyond that, look, the feature set is actually very similar to what we have with the GT DD Pro wheel. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 L and R buttons here, and you can see how it's kind of laid out in a PlayStation configuration. We've got the PlayStation button down the bottom there, our 4 X, square, circle, and triangle buttons there too. We've got our menu button, we've got our sharing button, we've got our 7-way funky switch, which in this case, unlike the GT DD Pro wheel, does actually have a rotary encoder function. So we can push it to the right, left, up, down, in, or rotary encoder. We then also have 4 5-way switches, 2 on either side, so left, right, up, down, and push button. No rotary encoder on these. Those are specifically designed and integrated into Gran Turismo 7, although they are mappable on PC as well, so you can assign them to pretty much whatever function you want. Now, it did take me a little while to get used to these over the rotary encoders that I normally drive with on my daily driver rig, but these actually did prove to be quite powerful on the PC as well, outside of GT7, just mapping them to things like your traction control, your ABS, your engine map, and so forth. In GT7, these are all kind of predefined arrangements. So depending on the car that you're driving, will stipulate what function is performed by what. So I believe it's fuel map here, traction control here, brake balance here, and then this guy allows you to thumb through various different pages so you can have a look at the weather radar and all sorts of other things inside GT7, and then you can scroll up and down to make adjustments to those things. So what that means is it's very easy to make those adjustments on the fly without taking your eyes off the road, which is really important. A lot of wheels you'll find, if you're having to manipulate a rotary encoder, or you're having to do some sort of an awkward movement and having to take your hands off the wheel. Often you're having to take your eyes off the road to look at the wheel. With this guy, and similarly with the GT DD Pro wheel as well, you establish muscle memory quite quickly, and then it becomes very easy to make those adjustments on the fly without having to take your eyes off the road, which means theoretically at least you shouldn't lose any time on track. So very good design with regards to that. The big button in the middle isn't actually a button, so it's just a branding thing. And then up the top here, as opposed to the little tiny screen on the GT DD Pro wheel, you'll notice this larger 2.7-inch OLED display. Exactly the same telemetry integration as you have on the DD1 and DD2 wheelbases, as well as the podium button module Endurance. So if you're familiar with those, exactly the same experience here on this wheel. So really cool to see that level of integration. So a good feature set. If we spin the wheel around as well, there's a couple of things that I'm very happy about here too. So we have really nicely integrated magnetic shifters here. They're not the best magnetic shifters that I've ever felt in my life, but again, for the price point, I think they've done a really good job here. We do have metal paddles on these as well, and a good feel there, not too much flex or twist or anything like that. There's a little bit of flex there, but again, I'd say that's well within the realms of reasonable. You can see the big neodymium magnets on the back of the wheel there too. So if we spin around the GT DD Pro wheel, these are just basically little micro switches that are spring loaded there, and you can even hear for yourselves there. They feel very flimsy compared to the magnetic shifters that we have on this wheel. So not really even in the same ballpark there. We also have the addition of some analog paddles at the bottom here as well. Now those can be defined as a bite point clutch, so you can set a defined bite point and have your clutch always release in the same manner. You can configure it to be a standard clutch and handbrake, a throttle and a brake if you can't use pedals, or just 2 analog axes if you wish to map them to whatever function that you want. So a pretty good, pretty rich feature set there for this kind of price point, I've got to say. A little bit more functionality that we got with the GT DD Pro. And if you compare to a couple of other wheels that come in at a similar kind of price point, this is the P1 V2 wheel. This doesn't have the rotary encoder or the 4 5-way switches, doesn't have the larger telemetry display. It's just got the 3x7 segment display up the top here. Doesn't have very nice feeling shifters by comparison, doesn't have analog paddles. So while it is a 300mm round wheel, which I am very happy about, it's not really in the same ballpark as this guy in terms of overall functionality. And then for around about the same price, they've also just released a bunch of other wheels, or wheel rims, I should say, in conjunction with their V2 CSL Elite hub. Now we've got a dedicated video, actually a couple of videos on the hub, a selection of wheels, as well as their new Sparko wheels like this one here. But none of those provide the versatility that we have here either, both in terms of functionality and just the size and diameter of the wheel. So I think that this is a pretty welcome wheel within their ecosystem, and may even subjectively for that reason appeal to some people as an additional wheel to have within your collection, even if you do have specialized wheels for other purposes. So before we unpack build quality and materials in more detail, a couple more things to talk about on the face of the wheel in terms of functionality. You may have noticed these 3 little lines here, which almost look like speakers or microphones in the face of the wheel. Those are in fact flag LEDs, very similar to what we have on a lot of other Fanatec wheels if you're familiar with those. So we're going to jump on the PC in just a minute and go into more detail on exactly how those work and what you can do with them. There is also a RPM LED strip underneath here as well, which is also configurable. One other thing I will mention is that we did come into quite a few issues with the telemetry module, even on PC at this point in time again, just with incorrect values being reported. One thing I noticed in particular was the tire temperature values in Assetto Corsa were absolutely crazy, and sometimes it wasn't showing me the distance of the car behind in ACC or iRacing, just little glitches like that. I'm sure that they'll get those things ironed out because that's going to be a firmware and software related thing. But just so that you're aware, depending on when they actually start shipping these out to customers, you may not have the best experience when it comes to that telemetry display straight out of the box, but I'm sure they will sort it out over time. If I cast my mind back to when we first reviewed the Podium button module Endurance and the DD1 and DD2 with their telemetry displays, there were quite a few issues there for a little while as well. So I think they've sorted those all out now. I don't remember seeing any issues last time we tested them, but just something to be aware of. Let's talk a little bit more about materials. We'll flip it around and talk about the quick release in just a minute. So if you own a GT DD Pro wheel, you're in for a pretty similar experience with regards to how the buttons feel and those kinds of things. So one big significant difference here is that there is a faux leather, I believe, I don't think it's genuine leather, it certainly doesn't smell like it, wrapping around the wheel. We haven't seen any signs of excessive wear and tear yet, but we've only put maybe sort of 5 or so hours into this wheel so far, so I wouldn't expect to see that. If you do end up buying one of these, make a note for yourself to come back to this video in 6 to 12 months time and drop a comment to let us know how things are going for you in terms of wear and tear. But I don't see any major cause for concern here in terms of wear and tear. In terms of button feel, look, I mean, the switches themselves, these little 5-way hat switches do have a pretty decent feeling to them. There's a good click in each position. They do feel a little bit plasticky. I'm actually not 100% certain whether they're aluminium or plastic. I don't want to make a call either way because I don't want to be wrong, but either way, they do have quite a nice feel to them. I'm leaning towards aluminium, but yeah, I could be wrong on that one. I can see little grub screws there holding them in place, which is what makes me think they might be aluminium. But either way, they've got a decent feeling to them. Your finger kind of sits in there quite nicely, and a good, solid, intentional click in each direction. Same deal with the 7-way funky switch as well. One thing I do like about that is that it's not easy to accidentally roll into the wrong direction. It kind of wants to go over a bit of a lobe before it goes into the next position. So it's a little bit better with regards to that than what we had here, where it's kind of a little bit more vague feeling. You can kind of just rock it from side to side there without having to kind of retract a little bit. So definitely I would say a significant improvement in the feeling of that particular button. All the other buttons have a pretty similar feeling to what they do on the GT DD Pro wheel. So look, I mean, honestly, these L and R buttons are pretty flimsy feeling. One thing I did notice when I was driving with big studio lights shining in my face was there was a bit of light coming through the inside of the shroud of these switches. So they're pretty protected in there. I can't imagine anything getting in there and snagging and breaking them, but it is potentially a little bit of a vulnerable position in there. So the wheel overall is quite plasticky, but look, again, at the price point, I really don't think that that's something to complain about. You expect that, particularly with something that has as much functionality as this. But on the subject of plastics, one thing that I do need to touch on here is the QR2 light which is pre-installed on this wheel. Now, I was really surprised to see this bundled with a DD Plus, simply because if you guys watched our QR2 review video, you would know that the QR2 limits the torque to 8 Newton meters. Now, that is not the case, I repeat, not the case with this particular wheel. They're saying that the wheel and the quick release were designed together to allow this to work at 15 Newton meters without any problems. Now, look, honestly, that seems a little bit odd to me, simply because the quick release is the quick release. The design of it is the same regardless of what wheel it's installed on. And you know, even though you can see it's a little bit recessed in here, and that's not generally an issue anyway, because obviously the point at which the quick release mounts to the wheel doesn't really matter which quick release you're using. It's going to have the same amount of flex anyway. So yeah, look, I'll be honest with you guys, I was pretty surprised when I read that. It actually threw me at first, and I had to go through and read the notes a second time just to make sure I wasn't missing something. Simply because, you know, if it's okay on this wheel, why isn't it okay on other wheels? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And what I will tell you, and we'll unpack this a little bit more when we talk about driving in just a minute, but I did find that over about 10 Newton meters of continuous torque on the DD Plus, I did start to notice the flex in the wheel in general a little bit more than on a lot of other wheels. Now, interestingly though, if you look at the video footage, you can see a little bit of flex around the quick release. The majority of the flex though is actually within the rim of the wheel itself. So I did just notice that when I was getting in and driving really hard over sort of that 10 Newton meter mark, I did start to be aware of it. Like, it wasn't immersion braking or anything like that, but I was definitely aware of the flex compared to some of the more expensive wheels, of course, similar to the experience using something like the P1 wheel. So it opens up a bit of an interesting question there, because my initial reaction was kind of, well, how come they're bundling a cheaper kind of designed wheel with, you know, what is at the moment, at least in my opinion, their highest end wheelbase? Because I actually think the DD Plus is better overall objectively in terms of what it brings to the sim racing experience than even the DD1, even the DD2, to be completely honest with you guys. So it just seemed a little bit strange, why bundle a kind of cheapish wheel with a, you know, really high end wheelbase? But then I thought about it and I'm like, well, you do have the option to buy the DD Plus on its own if the wheel isn't for you. And, you know, I think that a lot of people would rather have something that does the job well enough to get you by and, you know, gives you something nice and versatile that you can use for pretty much anything within sim racing without being forced to spend a lot more money. And those of you who this isn't good enough for, you're probably going to end up buying other wheels to replace it anyway to suit specific vehicles. So there are definitely some sacrifices there, and I would like it to be a little bit more sturdy than it is. But again, for the price point, I think that it does an okay job. But those are the limitations. Those are the things that I think you need to be aware of in terms of build quality. So yeah, important to note there that the quick release, even though it is the QR2 Lite, does still allow that full 15 Newton meters. I don't know what the extra cost is in actually manufacturing the standard QR2. I know they charge, I think it's $100 US more for that, and I certainly wouldn't want them to make this wheel $100 US more expensive. So yeah, I can certainly see why they've done things the way they have. I don't necessarily agree with every single design choice that they've made, but it does make sense to me why they've done things the way they have. And I think that covers pretty much everything we need to in terms of the wheel at face value. Let's jump over onto the sim rig now. I'll take you through software configuration and then we'll unpack the driving experience. Okay, so I want to give you a quick run through some of the configuration options available with this wheel in particular. We're not going to be focusing on force feedback settings and all those important things in today's video, simply because they have told us that the driver software may change between what we're looking at and what you guys will get your hands on once they start shipping out to customers. So one thing that I do just want to draw attention to here quickly is the fact that Fanatec, which is used for all the extended settings like we're going to be looking at today, and the basic driver package are still two separate software packages. It's been a number of years now since they released Fanatec, and look, it does have some really good functionality, but I still don't understand why they don't just integrate everything into the one software package, because it still does to this day, multiple years after they released this, create quite a lot of confusion with people. Often things don't work properly if you don't have the right version of Fanatec matched with the right version of the driver software, and it's just, to me at least, it just seems like an unnecessary complication in what could otherwise be a relatively streamlined thing. Most other brands these days have all these kinds of settings all integrated into the one package. So I think it's worth just mentioning that because it does create a little bit of confusion. But having said that, they do have some really powerful stuff in Fanatec these days. So I just want to quickly show you here the game profile, because this is something that they've, I guess, built upon quite significantly since the last time we really took a deep dive in here. So this does allow you to configure settings pertaining to telemetry and LED functionality, all those important things per game here. So you can click on buttons to enable those, and it will make adjustments to the INI files or any other settings that are necessary without having to go in and manually adjust things yourself in most cases. Another thing they've done, which is really, really great, is their recommended force feedback settings. So if we click on this button for each game, just as an example here, we'll do Assetto Corsa Competizione. So recommended FFB settings. And that brings up a web page, or a forum post, I should say, with their recommended settings for each of the games. Now, Maurice, the guy that puts these together, this one's actually posted by Dominic, I can see here, but Maurice, I think, does most of these profiles, and I know him quite well. We chat quite a bit about various techie things when we're doing these reviews, just to make sure we're getting accurate information. And I know that he's super, super passionate and really does obsess over getting these profiles as good as they can possibly be. And that's part of the reason why I don't generally do recommended settings as part of my review videos anymore, because Maurice does such a good job of these recommended settings. So it's definitely worth taking the time, putting these profiles in, and fiddling around, fine tuning to your preference by all means. But the profiles that these guys put together these days do a very good job as a baseline that you can then tweak to your personal preference. But where we want to have a look today is under the LED and ITM menus. Now, I will just mention vibration here. This particular wheel doesn't have vibration motors in it, so you'll see here it's only my V3 pedals that it's got adjustments for. Some of their older wheels now, I think some of the wheels that they're still selling do have the vibration motors in, but I know it's something that they're moving away from into the future. But if we click on LED here, you can see a nice little representation of the wheel. We can click on the main display here, and it gives us a bunch of things that we can adjust here. So what they do with their telemetry-based data and a lot of their LED control is a priority-based thing. So you can set priorities for various different bits of telemetry and then have it prioritize in what order it will display on either the LEDs or on your display. And that's what you can see here. So under telemetry data list, you can see we've got options for pit limiter, warning, speed, RPM, and so forth through here. And then we can set the priority of these for each. And this is just for our standard legacy mode display, like what you would have on any standard wheel, not to be confused with the intelligent telemetry mode that we're seeing displayed on the wheel right now. So you can set in a priority to 1 to 3, any one of these telemetry outputs that you want on the display. And then the C is for constant. So with it configured the way it is at the moment, we're gonna have speed displayed on the display all the time. And then when we change gear, it's gonna pop up and show us that we've changed gear and then go back to the standard display again afterwards. If we wanted to, we could have lap number as well. So every time you change laps, it'll flash up momentarily. Sector, fuel, you get the idea here, and you can also turn those off if you don't want to have them. If you want to change any one of these other things to constant, so say maybe you want to have RPM displayed at all times rather than your speed, all you would do is just click on constant for RPM instead of speed, and it will do that for you. And then we've got a couple of other adjustments here for things like shift point brackets and whatnot. So we'll close that off, and then we'll have a look at the LED adjustments for the various different areas on the wheel. So we do have separate adjustments for our flag LEDs, which you can see here. So that allows us to flash up various different telemetry-based data on the two flags on either side of the wheel. One thing that it doesn't do that a lot of aftermarket wheels are doing these days that are integrated with SimHub is spotter. So you don't have a left and right highlight on these wheels, and that's the same for all the Fanatec wheels as far as I'm aware at least. None of them allow you to actually flash up on the screen if there's a car left or a car right, which is something that I hope they're able to add sometime into the future, because the telemetry data is there. We know that because SimHub is able to do it. So something I'd like to see them add. But you can see here we've got telemetry for pit lane, pit limiter, wheel spin, and so forth, all the way down through all of our flag colors as well. And you can configure these if you want to. Just click on them and you can choose what color you want for each individual segment from the little color wheel just here. So again, pretty powerful stuff, but pretty standard these days, and the same as what they've got on a lot of other wheels these days as well. So nothing particularly groundbreaking there. But then you probably also notice the backlight around each of our 5-way switches here. That can also be adjusted to a static color of your choice using the adjustments here. You can adjust brightness, you can adjust values for red, green, and blue, or just choose from a preset here. And then you can also do telemetry-based stuff here, as well as Rev LED. So if we click on Rev LED, that allows you to define a certain threshold for each RPM range to display on the wheel. So you can actually have these lights work kind of like an RPM gauge, although we do have the integrated RPM gauge along the top here as well. And then we also have telemetry-based data too. So we've got 3 different priority modes, works the same way as what we described before with the integrated display. But then we have various different telemetry channels which you can use to highlight on these 4 lights as well. So same parameters as before: wheel spin, wheel lock, pit lane, pit limiter, anti-lock brakes, traction control, and then DRS active and all flags. Now I'm not sure exactly why, but some of these options for individual flags and DRS available are grayed out. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the reason for that is, but those appear to be the various different telemetry values that you're able to define for each one of these LED segments. So if we set one of those to say pit limiter, for example, then you can choose how you want that to actually behave on these lights when you engage your pit limiter. So again, pretty powerful stuff. We're going to set that just back to constant light for now though. And then we move across into our intelligent telemetry mode. So with this enabled, it works pretty much the same way as if you've got a DD1 or DD2, the integrated telemetry module on that, or if you've got a button module endurance, you'll be familiar with this as well. So it all works in pretty much the same way. You've got various different presets here which you can choose between, and you can prioritize these in a similar way to what we saw before. And then you can also choose the legacy mode here as well. So those are the adjustments that you can make in terms of the backlight and the telemetry module. You do of course also have the tuning menu, which is a really important part of the Fanatec ecosystem. Now, any of you who have seen our recent Fanatec reviews will be quite familiar with this, but I just want to quickly show you what they've done, the way they've integrated on this particular wheel, because they have made a couple of adjustments recently, and I think that some of these things do a really good job. So I'm going to start off by putting it into standard mode here. We were in advanced mode, and in standard mode, you've got a automatic setup and a custom setup. So in automatic setup, it takes care of most adjustments for you. In custom setup, you do have the option to tab through and make adjustments to some of the more important settings here. So all you do is just push left or right to thumb across with your 7-way funky switch, and then to make adjustments, you wind the switch up or down. So force feedback strength here, you can see we can adjust it up and down. I was just doing some drifting, which is the reason why that's turned down a little bit. We tab across to full force effect strength. We can then go across to natural damper and ACP mode, which is the mode in which the analog paddles on the back of the wheel operate. So you can choose between a CBP mode, which is clutch bite point, a clutch and handbrake, a brake and throttle mode, or a analog axis, which you can adjust and map basically however you want inside the game. I'm going to set it back to clutch bite point for now. We also have adjustment here for our brake force. So if you're using a set of Fanatec pedals connected through the wheelbase, you can adjust the maximum amount of force necessary to reach 100% scaling inside the driver. So that's not generally something that you're going to be adjusting frequently, but it is a useful tool to get everything feeling exactly the way you like it. And then that takes us back across to our main setup again. So if we switch into advanced mode by just holding down that button again, you see now we're in advanced mode. This allows us to switch between 5 individual profiles. So if you're driving different cars or different sims and you want to have a different setup for all your force feedback settings for each one of those cars or each one of those sims, this is a really powerful way of just quickly switching between 5 different profiles. So you don't have to alt tab out of the game to make adjustments. If you're jumping into a race at the last minute, you're on the starting line, you're ready to go, and you realize you've got the settings wrong, you can quickly adjust it on the wheel without having to alt tab out, which can be a race saving thing. It has saved me a couple of times. So an important feature there. And if we go through one of these, you can see there's a whole bunch more values here now that we can make adjustments to. I'm not going to run you through every single one of these right now, but it's basically all the same stuff that you would see in the driver. So adjustments for your friction settings, force feedback interpolation and whatnot. Now, one of the things that they've done now, which I think is really cool, is they actually have little tooltips that pop up on the display. So you can see here for our natural damper setting, for example, as you wind it up, it says high NDP slows down reaction and reduces force feedback detail. As you wind it down, NDP can add realistic feeling and prevent oscillation. So it actually goes a little bit further than just giving you a tooltip that explains what the setting does. It actually lets you know when you're approaching a value that might have an adverse effect and kind of warns you that what you're doing might not be exactly what you're wanting to feel. So these little hand-holding things are things that they've added over time quite quietly to the ecosystem, but they are things that I think do make a positive difference. So I think that covers everything you need to know in terms of software on the PC. So let's move across now, talk about the driving experience both on PC and on PS5. Okay, so let's unpack the driving experience now. So we're not going to go back through the same details that we've already covered with relation to the DD Plus wheelbase. We've got another video where we went into a huge amount of detail on everything you can expect from the DD Plus from a first look perspective. I don't really have anything to add to that at this point in time, simply because the experience has been exactly the same with this new unit that we've been sent. We still are on early drivers, and we still don't have full force integration in any game, so we can't really elaborate on anything that we shared previously. We'll double back and cover any future developments in that. But the big question I want to answer with today's video is it worth paying the extra premium for the DD Extreme package that comes with the steering wheel, or are you better off just buying the DD base on its own and then choosing your own wheel? So I think that this wheel ticks a lot of boxes for somebody coming into an ecosystem for the first time. Being a 300mm diameter wheel, perfect in my opinion at least, as an all-rounder wheel that you can use for pretty much driving anything. So all the way through from your Formula One style cars right through to rally and drifting. This is going to be okay for everything. Now obviously for Formula style cars, generally you would want to have a Formula style wheel, maybe a little smaller diameter than what this is, but this is perfectly fine for driving everything that we tested it with, from F1 cars in F1 23 all the way through to rally and drifting. So really great in terms of an all-rounder there. I love the fact that it's a round wheel as well. That's something that I've been complaining about within the Fanatec ecosystem for quite some time now. I just didn't really have any good quality options for a 300mm round wheel. There is the P1 rim, of course. The quality of that just isn't anywhere near what you have with this. Now, you might be looking at the pricing on their website and notice that you could pick up a P1 wheel and a McLaren V2 wheel, which we've rated very highly in the past, for around about the same kind of $300 mark US that you'd be looking at for the difference in the price between the DD Plus and the DD Extreme package. You do just need to factor in there, of course, that you will have the additional cost of QR2 adapters for both of those wheels if you want to use them with this bundle. Another really important factor there, as well as the fact that, as we mentioned earlier in the video, the QR2 light on this particular wheel doesn't limit the torque like it does on those other wheels. So you would actually need to go with a standard or a pro to unlock the full potential of the DD Plus wheelbase. Now, interestingly, Fanatec did originally send us across a QR1 adapter, which was basically a replacement nose for the CSDD and DD Plus, which they did tell us that they would be selling separately to allow people to use their QR1 based wheels on these new wheelbases. Now, that does come at the cost of less fidelity in terms of force feedback, particularly when it comes to those more high fidelity force feedback effects that we get with True Force. But at this point in time, there's no further information on whether that's going to be available. So the only option you have is to purchase a QR2 adapter for any wheel that you want to use on one of these new wheelbases. And likewise, if you continue down the page towards the likes of the BMW and Porsche wheels, again, they do come in at a similar price point to what you'd be paying for this, but they don't have the same level of functionality, particularly if you're playing GT7, and they also will have the additional cost of a QR2 necessary if you want to use them with these new wheelbases. I guess where I land on it is if you're looking at getting into an ecosystem for the very first time, then yeah, I think that for me, it would be worth paying the extra to get the package with the wheel, particularly if you're playing a lot of GT7. Now, it is really unfortunate, and it was the case as well with the GT DD Pro wheel. They don't sell these wheels on their own. So you kind of got to make the decision when you're getting into the ecosystem to begin with, when you're buying the base, whether or not you want the wheel or not. And yeah, it's a bit of a tricky choice, but I can tell you as well, if you do own a DD Pro that came with one of these wheels and you're looking at getting a DD Plus, this wheel is definitely a step up in quality overall and functionality over this wheel. You saw earlier we did a bit of a side-by-side comparison, but objectively the driving experience is better with this new wheel. The main differences that I find are just the feeling of the material in your hands. This is that kind of rubberized material that just kind of feels cheap in the hands. The shifters, again, nowhere near as nice as what we have here with the magnetic ones. No analog paddles, and look, otherwise functionality-wise, it's pretty similar. It doesn't have the rotary encoder on the switch here that we have on the new one, but otherwise telemetry and lighting aside, not a huge difference between the two. So I'd say it's a hard call, really. It's a very subjective thing, but I do think that if you're playing a lot of GT7 in particular and you already own a DD Pro, you're looking at stepping up to the Plus, then yeah, I probably still would pay the extra to get this new wheel and maybe sell the old kit as a package together, rather than trying to keep that old wheel and sell the base on its own. I think you're probably going to be happier overall with this wheel than you are with that one. So what about if you're already invested in the Fanatec ecosystem and already own a selection of wheels that have you covered for most of the types of cars that you drive? So look, I think in that case, there's not really anything that absolutely screams out about this wheel to make it a must-have for somebody that already has a collection of other wheels. I think that as a standalone device, it does do a very good job. It has a lot of the functionality in terms of things like the telemetry, the magnetic shifters, the analog paddles that most other cheaper wheels within their ecosystem don't have. So if you only have some other cheap wheels, then maybe it might be worth considering whether this might replace a lot of those. Maybe you'll be able to sell those wheels, make up the difference if you're ordering a DD Plus to get this wheel that covers you across all of those bases. That might be a consideration, but if you're really happy with the wheels that you already have, I don't really see any massively compelling reason to, you know, feel that you have to buy this wheel to have it in your collection over any others. So to summarize here, I think this wheel does a really good job in terms of being versatile enough that it's going to get you up and driving with pretty much any type of vehicle that you're likely to encounter in sim racing. Obviously, as you go further down the rabbit hole, you probably will want to upgrade from something like this to something that is more suited for each particular style of car that you might be driving. But if you can only afford one wheel, I think this is probably the best wheel within the Fanatec ecosystem at this point in time to suit the biggest number of different types of driving styles and vehicles that you might find in sim racing. So in that regard, I think they've done a really good job here. And yeah, that's definitely the big positive, I think, takeaway with this wheel. On the negative side, I'd be lying if I didn't say that the wheel does feel a little bit entry level for the base that it's packaged with. So it just, the reason I say that is it does feel a little bit plasticky in the hands. The buttons overall do have a pretty good feel to them, other than just the L and R buttons, which we discussed on the desk a little bit earlier. But look, I'd be lying if I didn't say that anywhere over about maybe 10 Newton meters of force, I did start to actually perceive while I was driving the little bit of flex and twist that you have in the wheel. You know, it wasn't immersion braking by any means, but you definitely do notice it when you're used to driving with more high-end wheels. So on that front, it would have been nice if the wheel was a little bit more high-end, given that it's paired with such a fantastic high-end base like this one. But then on the flip side to that, it would cost more money if that was the case as well. So it's a bit of an awkward one there. What I will say is that it is great that at the point of launch here, we do have the option of whether you want to buy the base on its own or buy the base paired with the wheel. When the GT DD Pro initially launched, you didn't actually have the option to buy the base on its own without the wheel. And a lot of people weren't really interested in the wheel, but had to spend the extra money just to get the base. And they, you know, the wheel ended up being a throwaway item or something that they tried to sell, and often had quite a lot of difficulty doing so. So I am really happy that they do have the option for both scenarios here. The wheel isn't going to suit everybody. If you've already got a wide selection of other wheels that suit all the types of driving that you want to do, might not really be interested in this wheel, so then you have the option of just buying the base on its own. But if you're looking to get up and running for the first time in sim racing, like I said, this wheel is going to have you covered, and it's pretty much as simple as that, guys. So I really hope the video has helped you out, guys. If it has, please do leave a thumbs up. Let us know down in the comments down below as well what you guys think. Do you already have a selection of wheels that you think has you covered, or is this something that you're going to be interested? Really interested to hear your thoughts on there. And while you're down in the comments, make sure you subscribe as well so you don't miss out on future videos as they come out. We will be revisiting, as I said, and covering the base in more detail once full force is integrated into a couple of games and we have final drivers as well. But for now, I think that covers pretty much everything that we can in today's video. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.